Prepping for a new market. First, congratulations. You're moving on up. You got the better job that you wanted. And whether it's a great internship, a great first job, or that even better second job, you got it. And of course, with that excitement comes the motivation to hit the ground running. All that takes is preparation. And because of the internet, there's a lot you can do. The first thing you want to do is read all the local news websites and newspapers from that town. And of course, you're doing this for a handful of reasons. The first, the most obvious one that you already know, is to catch up on the actual news that's right now important to that market. Just like you check the news before going on that in-person job interview at the station, you're doing it now with both intentionality and purpose. Because after all, learning what's going on now has extreme value. Because you're going to at some point end up reporting on what you're reading. The second reason has a lot to do with that first one, and that is that when you're reading these stories and watching these stories, make a Google Doc of who all the sources are. Keep track of who on the city council is talking, or who the sources are quoted in the stories that these reporters are breaking. Some of these people are probably what you call connectors in your market, meaning they know a lot of people, are told a lot of things, and sometimes leak it to the media. To use a cliche, these are the movers and shakers in your market who are worth knowing because they have lots of information about something. So, when you start seeing names over and over and over again, that's someone with connections in that market. You also may find a gap in the reporting or the angles that reporters don't know to cover. That adds value to your station because you're looking at the coverage from a different perspective. That will show through when you eventually report on that topic. Also, you may be assigned to do follow-up stories on the current stories that you're reading. Remember, always remember, people call out sick, people take personal days, and every now and again, you're allowed to take vacation. And you might be the one who's asked to cover that beat or do a follow-up story on a story you haven't been consistently covering. So, that's why, even if you're a one-person band, you're considered a general assignment reporter because you're always at the ready to cover anything at a moment's notice. Now, Facebook groups and blogs are great resources. You can also get ahead by looking for influencers specifically in Facebook groups and of course blogs in your market. There are always influential mommy blogs, and if there's a military base nearby, military blogs. You can ask your news director if you'll be assigned a specific beat, or better yet, since you are absorbing all of the news from the station's website, you'll be able to figure out who's on what beat and pitch being on a beat that doesn't have a reporter. Crime, city hall, and education are probably already covered. Consumer investigative? It might be as well. That'll depend upon the market, because not all markets have the staff for that. So that could be an opportunity. The same with the local medical beat as well as environmental. You have to be careful with the local medical beat because most of what you report on has to be science or a breakthrough or someone local contributing to the field. That's because the trap medical reporters sometimes fall into, especially in smaller markets, is just covering the great new medical machine the local hospital is getting, like a Da Vinci surgical machine. These stories are news, but doing too many of them, especially for the same hospital, will make you the unofficial media spokesperson for the hospital, which of course isn't a journalist's job. The hospital, they'll love it because it's free media that they didn't have to pay for, but again, it's not a journalist's job. So, it's something to be aware of. Something else important to do is to do a basic Google search on the cities and towns that make your market. If you Google a city or town, you can see, one, how many people live there. Then Google companies plus your city, and you'll be able to find a list of the large companies in town that therefore fuel the economies of those cities because they're so big. Now this is really what you want to discover, because where people work is where their money comes from, and therefore that's the money that fuels that local economy. It's also important to know because you want to know what the average income level of the people in your market are, as well as what the major industries are. Remember that video about unemployment? This is where the preparation for a story like that starts. Being able to talk intelligently about the cities and local economies in your market will make you the go-to reporter on big stories like unemployment or changes in an industry. In Dallas, some of the major companies are ExxonMobil, so oil and gas as an industry is huge. American Airlines and Southwest Airlines are as well, so aviation is also a huge industry. Then there's AT&T that covers telecommunications, Frito-Lay, which covers food and beverage, as does Yum Brands that owns KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut, among other franchise restaurants worldwide. There's also Lockheed Martin, a military aircraft manufacturer, and how about the Naval Joint Reserve Base in Fort Worth that covers the military as an industry. Knowing the industries in your market helps you keep a radar out for the kinds of important news in your market. When news affects any one of these industries, it's obviously news, and news that will make air. It's also important to know how people make their money, because if one of the industries all of a sudden has massive layoffs, we've talked about how big of news that is, and not only will you be reporting it, there's probably going to be team coverage of that. Now, remember the story from the General Motors plant in Arlington, the one that we use to teach focus of a story? Well, there were layoffs there in 2009 when the economy tanked. The story you saw was from 2011, when GM was announcing good news at that plant because people were starting to buy new cars again. Now this was a positive story only because it had previously been a negative one. Another example is to take into account that all the industries I just listed are in stark contrast to Springfield, Illinois, where I worked when I worked for ABC News Channel 20. Springfield is the capital city of Illinois, and therefore is where the State House is. Springfield is also one of the largest cities in that area, meaning media market, so it had a very active city council. Both of these factors made it so that many of the jobs in the area were government jobs, meaning public jobs, and that's very different than Dallas-Fort Worth. This is important because the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows of government jobs are far different than private sector jobs. So, those are distinctions that you need to be aware of so you can read up on them. Now, let's talk about your timeline of growth as a reporter in your market. When you look at your standard 2-year reporting contract, here's how your first and second job will probably go. The first 6 months is you figuring out the area, getting used to covering news in that area, as well as the kind of news that happens to break in that area. And of course, how do you get around town fast to actually cover it? Once you learn those things, you get to spend 100% of your time and 100% of your energy enterprising good stories, and also doing good storytelling. It's all doable because you know the area and now have some good contacts. You'll do this for the rest of your time there, even as you enter the last 9 months of your contract. Then, during the last 6 months of your contract, in addition to doing great reporting, you'll also be looking for your next job. If you're an anchor reporter on a 3-year contract, the graphic is the same. You just add in a year of great reporting in the middle. So hopefully this all helps you understand how to educate yourself on the market that you'll be reporting in and give you a general idea of the road ahead as you enter that new market. It's an exciting time, and to be honest, the more you learn about it and the more comfortable you get, the more exciting it gets. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'll see you in the next video.